Zdar pozemštění, tady je Jerin a já vás vítám u hry Beginner's Guide. A než se dostaneme k této hře, tak jsem chtěl říct, že tenhle ten týden zase asi nebudou úplně videa, protože já budu pryč, pojedu na Slovensku tam kopat nějaký šutry, takže možná, že potom z toho bude i nějaký video, no uvidíme, jestli něco bude nebo ne. No, ale k téhletý hře, takže je to hra od autorů The Stanley Parable, má fakt hodně skvělý hodnocení na Steamu, takže by to neměla být žádná sračka. Jediný problém je, že to bude hodně opovídání a i kdybych byl super překladatel, tak bych to stejně nestíhal vám překládat, takže pokud se na mě koukáte někdo, kdo úplně v angličtině nevynikáte, tak nevím, jestli z téhletý hry budete úplně něco mít. Jako můžete se koukat, jak tam budu pobíhat, narážet do stěn a pořádně to tam srát, ale pokud chcete hlavně ten příběh, tak tohle to asi není úplně pro vás. Budou tam sice titulky, takže když tak, kdybyste to úplně neslyšeli, tak dá se to z toho nějak odvodit. Tušit tam budu i já, něco možná, podle toho, no uvidíme. No rovnou začneme, mám to takhle zakecávat, ještě bych tady prozradil něco strašně tajného o sobě a to by nikdo nechtěl, tyjo, ještě, no, radši budu mlčet. No, pustíme se do hry, oni tady budou povídat, takže já do toho nebudu zbytečně kecat, prostě užijte si hru, berte to spíš jako takovej filmík, nebo jak bych to nazval. Pokud se vám tohle to bude líbit, tak to bude mít tak, typuju 3 díly tahle ta hra. Takže můžeme začít. Jo, audio máme zapnutý. To je v pohodě tohleto. Jo, myš mám, V a S, jo, mě by možná stačila takováhle kláveska.
Hi there.
Ciao.
Thank you very much for playing the Beginner's Guide. My name is Davey Reedon. I wrote The Stanley Parable, and while that game tells a pretty absurd story, today I'm going to tell you about a series of events that happened between 2008 and 2011. We're going to look at the games made by a friend of mine named CODA. Now, these games mean a lot to me. I met CODA in early 2009 at a time when I was really struggling with some personal stuff, and his work pointed me in a very powerful direction. I found it to be a good reference point for the kinds of creative works that I wanted to make. So just to start you off, this is, I think, the first game he ever made.
Oh.
It's a level for Counter-Strike. You can walk around here, by the way.
Hustý.
And mostly it's just CODA learning the basics of building a 3D environment. But what I like is that even though he starts from the simple aesthetic of a desert town, he then scatters these colorful abstract blobs and impossible floating crates around the level. And of course, it destroys the illusion that this actually is a desert town, and instead this level becomes a kind of calling card from its creator. It's like a reminder that this video game was constructed by a real person. And it kind of makes you wonder, what was going through his head as he was building this? This is what I like about all of CODA's games. I mean, not that they're all fascinating as games, but that they are all going to give us access to their creator. I want us to see past the games themselves. I want to get to know who this human being really is. And that's exactly what we're going to do here. So, it's 2008, CODA starts making these games, and he never releases any of them. He doesn't put them onto the internet, he just makes them and then immediately abandons them, and they sit on his computer forever. And I think he really understood this image of himself as a recluse. At one point, he jokingly renamed his computer's recycling bin to Important Games Folder. So, you know, this was just how he worked. He tended to crank them out one after the other without even really pausing to try to understand what he had just made, until suddenly one day, he just stopped.
Cože?
In 2011, that was it. He made his last game, and then he hasn't made another one since. And that's why I've taken this opportunity to gather all of his work together, is because I find his games powerful and interesting, and I'd like this collection to reach him, to maybe encourage him to start creating again. And if the people like you who play this also happen to find his work interesting, then I'm sure it'll just send that much stronger of a message of encouragement to CODA. So thanks for joining me on this. If you have a particular interpretation that I haven't mentioned here, or if you just need to get in touch, you can email me at davey WREDEN@gmail.com. Okay, that's about it for introduction. Let's take a look at CODA's first proper game. As each game is loading, I'll show you the date that it was completed. This first one was made in November 2008.
No, tak to máme pěkný. Bílá místnost, super. Co já jsem to tady k tomu chtěl říct? No, že já jsem taky chviličku měl takový období, že jsem chtěl vytvářet nějaký mapy. No samozřejmě v Minecraftu, co si budeme povídat, že ano. Ale jestli znáte Quake 3 arénu, nebo jak jinak se to jmenuje, tak to bylo asi první hra, do které jsem si já vyrobil nějaký mapy. Vytvářel jsem je na lyžáku, když si kamarád tam vzal notebook, tady jsme tam smažili Quakea, což bylo docela brutál. No, ale nebudeme to zakecávat, takže budeme asi teda hrát. No, vypadá to docela zajímavě. Já teda být tím vypravěčem bych si dával bacha na to, jaký e-mail tady dává, protože tady bude takových sráčů, co mu tam něco pošle, já bych mu tam taky mohl něco poslat. Čau, já jsem Jerin a mám rád tvoje hry. Stanley Parable byl úžasný. Takže já doufám, že ten CODA, nebo jak ho jinak nazvat, bude vyrábět další hry, protože si mi líbí tady ty nápisy na svět. Já mám zbraň! Já mám zbraň! Ne, sem nemůžu.
This game is called Escape from Whisper, and it's one of the more generic games you'll see from CODA.
Aha, tak tady neprojdeme. Super. Ještě vědět, co je to generic.
You can click to fire the gun.
Ten je dobrý, to, že víš, že jsem nestřílel. Dveře? Ne, to nejsou dveře, tady jsou dveře. No, prostě půjdem. Wow, ježiš. Ono se něco vběhne, Nemůžu tam.
It kind of looks like this game was abandoned mid-development. For instance, you have this gun, which you'd think would indicate that there are supposed to be monsters or enemies somewhere, but then clearly there are no enemies anywhere. You can't even reload the gun when you run out of bullets. But ultimately we don't really know. Maybe CODA thought that actually it was complete the way that it is. And I think that we should talk about his games for what they are, rather than for what they're not.
Takže nemůžu přebít, dobře, tak půjdeme dál.
I love how you can see the bottom of the universe from this room.
Takový trošku odfláklý, no, ale asi CODA nikdy nepočítal s tím, že by ty hry někdo hrál. Tyjo, to je nějaká úplně tajná místnost. Wow, ježiš.
Apparently the space station has a labyrinth on it. Sure, I don't know. There's really no reason for it that I've ever been able to discern, so in the interest of time, I'm just gonna skip you on past it.
No dobrý, no. Tak.
Okay, this is the part that's interesting. The game has this narrative about the whisper machine and how it has to be turned off, and then you get to the engine room.
Hey, you there, in the engine room. You could save us all.
Jasně.
That beam is
Já jsem doktor Who.
We could disrupt it by introducing a great enough heat signature. If your body could stop the beam.
To se mám jako zabít,
It's so much to ask, but for all of our lives, would you do it? Could you give yourself?
Ne. Nemůžu. Se nemůžu zabíjet přece sám sebe. A líbí se mi, že mě nenechal v tom bludišti tam. Ježiš, ale tady asi není nic jiného, co tady můžu udělat. I dveře se zavřely. No dobře, no, tak se obětuji, já jsem
This is not a
obětaný.
branching point, unfortunately. The only option is to step it. Let me pause here for a second. What you just experienced, stepping into the beam and then dying, is probably what CODA had initially intended when he was developing this level. But when he first compiles and plays it, something goes wrong. There's a bug somewhere. And this is what happens instead.
Co? Jak jako bug? Jak jako že jsem přežil? Jak to, že jsem přežil, kurňa? Já chci přežít. Wow.
The beam causes you to start floating. And this is an important moment for him. Because yes, this is technically a glitch, but CODA identifies something human about it. like how small it makes you feel in the face of this larger chaotic system. Or this floating could be the afterlife, a peaceful place, juxtaposed against all of the hysteria that you've just had to traverse. I don't even know. I have no idea what he was thinking, but what's clear is that after making this, something lodges itself in his brain. He wants to do more of these really weird and experimental designs. So he stops work on this and moves on to a stream of tiny little games that go in all sorts of directions. Let's go ahead and take a look at the first game he made after leaving this one behind.
Jo, dobře. Takže se tady zase zamýšlíme nad tím, proč to asi udělal. A Codovi se to...
Yep, in this game you can only walk backwards.
Cože? Shit! Ne! Do prdele! Kdo to vymyslel? On byl fakt šílený, je šílený. Ale ne, líbí se. Tak tohle to je dobrá blbost. Ježiš, to se... No, tak to si pro nás CODA něco, já nevím jak to...
So it's a short and relatively minimalist experiment combining motion and narrative. It is less advanced than the previous game, but actually it seems to be more focused, more complete. CODA is trying to give it a unique voice rather than simply basing it on a pre-existing trope.
No dobře, couvám. Ježiš, to jsou nádherný schody, to jsou schody. To mi připomíná toho. Úžasňákovi, jak tam ta ženská mu měla vyrábět ten oblek nějak.
It's a short little thought, it says what it wants to say, and then it ends. Didn't need anything more than that.
Aha.
Which to me is why it works, because it gets out quick. Okay, next one.
Dobře, tak se pustíme do další gamesy. Ježíš, tady na mě něco buffne určitě zas. No dobře, vstupuju, OK, vstupuju, kam vstupuju? Jo, můžu jít nazpátek. Dobře, jdeme dál.
And that's it. Okay, the meaning of this game won't be clear just yet. Please be patient with me for a few more games and I promise you'll see what makes it interesting.
Aha, dobře. Tak tohle byla další hra, jo? Dobře, sliboval, že budou i lepší.
Oftentimes CODA would put bizarre titles like this one at the start of his games.
Wood?
I wish I'd known him at the time that he was making these early games. He would really only talk to me about his work as he was making it. Once he stopped work on a game, like, that was it. It was dead to him. And I don't agree with that at all, but what are you gonna do?
No, nemůžu spadnout, no to je dobrý, no. Tady když nemůžu spadnout, tak nic, no. Já jsem chtěl aspoň spadnout. Já myslel, že je to ten cíl té hry, a ono ne, nemůžu spadnout. Ale proč bych to dělal, že jo? A teďka se mi to zpomaluje,
Once
no.
you've been slowed to an absolute crawl, the door at the top of the stairs opens. So why, if CODA's not showing these games to anyone, why bother opening the door at all? Well, to show you, I'm modifying the game here so that when you press enter, it'll bring you back up to full speed so you can enter the door for yourself.
Hustý, já jsem to hacknul. Cože? Co to je? To je nebe.
A room that's warm and nice and filled with little ideas for games. CODA would often tell me that he didn't mind if people thought of him as cold or distant. He said that he knew that he was actually a vibrant and compassionate person, but that it takes time to really see that. It can be a very slow climb to get there.
Oh. Tak to byla další hustá hra. Ready, set, fish. Tak co si pro nás teďka připravil? Místnostka obyčejná. Můžu chodit i dopředu, hustý, dveře se otevřely. To mi připomíná super hot, jo, kdybych tady mohl zpomalit čas. No, tak tohle vypadá jako promakaně. Wow.
Well, this is new for CODA. It's an actual puzzle. Go ahead and see if you can solve it.
Ježiš, puzzle. Já jsem vyřešil puzzle. Tu tady je nějaká mlha. Počkat.
Don't forget that solution, because we're going to see this puzzle again soon.
Aha.
We're gonna see it a lot.
A kurňa. No dobře, zatím se tu nic příšerného nestalo. Zatím jsem tady zvládnul jeden puzzle.
So that seems to be it, right? You walk down a corridor, you solve a puzzle, you get to the end. Simple enough.
No.
All right. Now I'm going to modify the game again, so that when you press enter, it'll remove all of the walls from this room.
Ty vole. Brutál. Proč je to konec?
How about that? There was more to it than we had any way of knowing. I actually find it funny that this game comes after the stairs game, since they essentially convey the opposite idea. So, in the stairs game, a dull exterior concealed a rich interior. And then, in this level, a dull interior hides this fantastic outer world. Either way, I think that the point is the same, is that most of the time you don't get to know what you're missing, or even that you're missing anything. That's not your role as a player. So if your role here is not to understand, then what is it?
Ty jo. Ježíš. Proč zase tahle? Proč zase tadle? Proč zase tadle hra?
Aha. So this, combined with the entering game from earlier, tells us that CODA believes his games are connected somehow. It could even be that the stairs game and the puzzle game are literally connected in between this and the entering game. There's a bigger picture that all of his games are meant to play a role in, some larger meaning that we won't be able to grasp until we've seen all of them. And once we have, we can step back and start to understand what exactly that bigger picture is.
Mě hlavně dostává ten borec, tyjo, že prostě, kde ty hry sehnal u něj prostě. A že prostě takhle prošel a zjistil, co je mimo ně. To je docela wow. Pěkný. Hustý. Moc daleko jít nemůžu, dobře. Je tady pěkný domeček uprostřed. Takovýhle by se mi líbil. Kdybych měl takovýhle domek, měl bych dole, co to je, kavárna nějaká, no tak...
Let's talk about video game development for a second. Every video game runs on what's called an engine, which determines what the game can and cannot do. So in other words, the engine is a set of tools for game development.
Dobře.
To make all of these games, CODA is using an engine called Source. Like all engines, Source has certain things that it does well, and it has certain things that it does poorly. One of the things that it does very well is boxy linear corridors. That's why so many of CODA's games are set in these large, flat, empty rooms, is just because he's working with what the engine does well. The tools available to the creator shape what kinds of creative work they're going to end up making. You might consider paying attention to the architecture in CODA's games, to notice how they seem to stem from an engine that's very good at producing linear, boxy corridors.
Hej, já jsem to chtěl fejkovat. No dobře, tak nic. Tak půjdeme po schodech. Wow, tady je jumping, jumping, jumping. Adame, jak se tomu říká, když jumpuješ? Parkour, ano, já se na to nikdy nemůžu vzpomenout, že je to parkour. Hej, tak to urychlíme trošku. Fik. Ne. Oh, ne. Je, on věděl, že já spadnu, že já jsem levý jak poleno, tak mě radši nasměroval tam, kam mám dopadnout. A tady ty schody musím, jo, ono je to tady sklo, aha, abych si to už neskracoval. Jasně, hustý, tyjo, boží, tohle to se mi líbí. Tohle to je asi nějaký kryt? Ježiš, počkat, není to takový to pro prasata. Pomoc! To jestli tady na mě pošle prasata. What the fuck? Že? Nejdu.
This prison, funny enough, in CODA's original design, the doors stayed shut for a full hour before letting you go.
Wow.
If you don't mind, I think we're gonna skip that.
Dobře, díky, že jsi mi to...
This is something that he and I used to argue about a lot. You know, whether a game ought to actually be playable, whether it means anything if no one can get through it. And I would always defend that, you know, all this work goes into the game, why not make it playable and accessible? And so we just got into heated arguments over it, and there was one time that after one of these conversations, he went home, and a day or two later, he sent me a zip file entitled Playable Games that was full of hundreds of individual games, each of which was just an empty box that you walked around in and nothing else. Believe me, I played every single one of those just to find out if there was like a gag hidden somewhere. There wasn't.
To je docela borec, tyjo, že je všechny zahrál. Ale já taky hraju hodně her, no, ale takovýhle mini hry jsem teda ještě nikdy nehrál. Tohleto... Co pak to je? My jsme někde venku, svítí tady slunéčko. Aha, tak tohle to trošku nevychytal. Ale tak co, že jo? Nikomu to nechtěl ukazovat. Jenom... Ježiš,
It's the puzzle again, with the exact same solution as the last time.
Fakt? Whee!
There's still no clear indication of what makes this puzzle so special that CODA is going to return to it over and over. But I promise I'll share with you my interpretation very shortly.
Tak, jdeme. Wow, my jdeme z kopce, ale vypadá to, jako kdyby jsme šli úplně normálně. Tohle by byly dobrý Quake mapy. Kde to jsme? Listen! To bylo v jednom díle Doktora Who.
Here, CODA begins using a kind of dialogue system that he fashioned out of the engine's chat capabilities. Use the 1, 2, 3 buttons on your keyboard to respond.
Dáme 2. Tak já třeba... Jasně, udělal jsem ten puzzle tady předtím, tak dáme 2, že si to už nepamatuju. Dobře, tak třeba... Tak jim řekneme, že je tady jiná cesta. Sorry. Dveře ven, dveře ven, dveře ven. Dostal jsem se ven? Ne. Ne. Dobře, dobře, vím jak ho. Tak dáme 1, protože bych se měl zajímat pro tu. Wow, co? Schody dolů, určitě jdu zase tam, kde jsem začal. To je jasný.
And so we make one last descent down to the final floor of the level.
Cože? Já jsem se fakt od nich dostal, jo. Dlouhé chodbišky. Ježiš, kde tu jsem? Takový pěkný městečko. Že se s tím tak prděl, když to nikomu nechtěl dát.
Okay, I can't tell you quite why, but for some reason CODA fixates on this lamppost. It's going to appear at the end of every single one of his games from here on out. I'll tell you what I think. I think that up to this point, you know, he's been making really strange and abstract games with no clear purpose, and maybe you can only float around in that headspace for so long. Because now he wants something to hold on to. He wants a reference point. He wants the work to be leading to something. He wants a destination, which is what this lamppost is. It's a destination. We're gonna see it in the work as well. His games are just gonna become a lot more cohesive, a lot more fully developed, with more of a clear idea behind them. And as we go, that idea will get clearer and clearer and clearer.
Super, takže jsme tohleto dojeli. Teda, budeme hledat světlo ve tmě od teďka. Už 2009, jo, my jsme rychlí. This game is... What? Teda, no je to podobný style všechno. Ale vypadá to zajímavě, stále je tam něco nového, tyjo, co já bych byl rád, kdybych vymyslel jednu Tady už mi i něco říká.
So first off, I'm sure you can deduce this, but this game is not connected to the internet. All of the notes that you're gonna see have been written by CODA.
Wow.
This was actually the first game of his that I ever played. This was shortly after I met him at a weekend game jam in Sacramento, where I grew up. I saw him working on this very level, and it was just so different from anything that anyone else was doing. So right away I was like, I have to be friends with this person. In retrospect, I think I was probably a bit too pushy, trying to get his attention. I was over-enthusiastic. But he was very gracious about it and very patient with me. And I cooled off eventually.
Dobře. What the fuck? Tyjo, ten přesně... No, to je v prdeli, tohle já neprojdu teda. Can you guys hear me? No. Hello?
Oh, feel free to skip over any of these notes if they're not doing anything for you. Nothing extra is going to happen if you read all of them. Either way, to me they convey a sense of loneliness. I see this person who's filled with thoughts and feelings and beliefs and has no way to express them except as scattered and unheard voices in a game that wasn't meant to be played.
I am king of the world! Adame, chceš být taky king of the world?
But it's ironic, isn't it? That in playing this game and seeing how alone CODA often felt, that we get to know him better and actually kind of connect with him. And I have to be honest with you, this idea is really seductive to me. That I could just play someone's game and see the voices in their head and get to know them better and have to do less of the messy in-person socializing.
Chuda.
I could just get to know you through your work. I think this is why I always liked CODA's games so much, is because it felt like they let me have that connection. I felt as though he was inviting me personally into his world. And then I feel less lonely too.
Tam už nevěděl, co napsat. No, co to tady je za shit všechno? Teda tohle to bych mohl procházet hodiny. Ale půjdeme sem. Půjdeme se sem podívat, co tady je. I'm free to do what I want. Jo, Áďo. Ne. Tak ne. Tyjo, tak ten se asi hodně nudil. Wow. Super výtvarný dílo. Hele, a co když skočím dolů? Nemůžu skočit dolů. Sákryš. A co tady? Tady nemůžu skočit? Uiii, nemůžu skočit. Třeba je to tamhleto fake, třeba se tam nedá dostat. Teda. Tamhle na ten obraz se musím podívat. Tak si se mnou povídej, když to potřebuješ. Sakra. Ty, kde na to jako bral nápady vůbec? Ty jo. Art. Nemá to být, že prostě tady jsou lidi a nemůžou se hejbat. A tohle je, co oni říkají. Tak. Rychle, rychle, rychle. Ježiše, já jsem tady stoupil v depresi, tyjo, nikdo tady není, jsem tady sám. Všude samý takovýhle hrozný nouty. Jo, já tu hru porazím.
At the end of this level, we're going to see the puzzle again. And here, I'll tell you what I think the puzzle means. Each of these games represents an idea that was on CODA's mind at the time that he was making it. And the puzzle is a way of closing the door on a previous chapter of his life before moving on to the next one. In each of his games, after exploring a theme that, he might find difficult, CODA can then place this puzzle that he knows has a reliable solution, he understands exactly how it works, and so it gives him a simple mechanism for moving on. And because there's this dark area between the doors, a space between spaces, before you move on, you get to pause. Just for a moment, a few seconds to reflect on and let go of the events that led you here. To step back and connect the pieces together. To grasp at that elusive bigger picture.
Ježiš, to je za zvuky. What the fuck? Speak. Wow. Tak tohle je zajímavý.
Okay, this one is tough. It's gonna kind of just spin its own wheels for a few minutes. Hang with it.
No. Tohle by mohl být zajímavý level, ale já si myslím, že pro tohle video by to už mohl být Čech, protože jsem říkal, že ho rozdělím tak na 3 díly, aspoň pokud se to bude líbit. Takže pokud se vám tohleto video líbilo, tak dejte like, napište koment, můžete ho klidně i sdílet, za to budu rád, ukažte ho svým kamarádům, kamarádkám, dědečkům, babičkám a co já vím, komu všem, ne, stačí kámošům a kámoškám. A můžete to sdílet na Facebooku. Nebo dejte odběr, za to budu taky rád a mě to podpoří, abych natáčel lepší hry a dělal víc livestreamy a co já vím všechno. A celkově z toho budu mít takový lepší pocit. Takže já se s vámi pro dnešní video zatím loučím. A to je asi všechno, co jsem chtěl říct, tak zatím čus.